Hello and welcome to GreenMent. I'm Lakshmi Karthanath with
Dr Hamed al Sinawi.
And today, once again, we are in the clinic. Yes. So this is a session room.
Exactly. So welcome to therapy.
So we are going to have a few series of therapies. But first of all, today we're going to be talking about empathy. Empathy has different meanings, different values for different people. Some may not even realize they lack empathy. Yeah. So, Doctor, first of all, I'll let you define it.
So empathy, basically, in simple terms, is being able to understand and appreciate other people's thoughts and feelings without actually judging them. And this is something that we do most of the time during our daily life. We empathize with our colleagues, with our friends, with our family members. Sometimes we empathize with people that are appearing in the news. For example, a couple of weeks ago, there was that story of the Moroccan boy who was stuck in the well. So everybody has like a group empathy where they empathized with the family. They couldn't imagine how horrible the whole situation for the family who are waiting and is hoping that this child will be removed there safely. And sadly, that didn't happen. But this was just an example of how empathy can be not just from person to person, but the whole public empathizing toward a particular person.
So this we saw actually response from across the globe.
Yes.
It didn't matter the region, the language, the culture.
Race, the age, the cultural background, exactly. So people have, at the end of the day, we're all humans. We react to things in a similar way. And when it comes to empathy, people usually define it into three components. The first is understanding the situation. So, for example, you see somebody with for example, who had a car accident, he has a broken leg, so you understand it's painful. Emotional is being able to feel that pain. And, for example, if you hit your foot in the table, I will react. Or if you tell me a sad story, I can almost feel that I am emotionally involved. And some people cry by watching movies. Some people cry by listening to other people saying sad things. So that's the emotional empathy. And then compassion is bringing this together. So this is where the thought, the feeling crystallize into an action. So for example, if I see you're feeling sad, you're about to cry, I get emotionally, I react, I pass you a box of tissue. That's why we have a box of tissue here all the time. So that's the compassion part. So that's the behavioral component. So I do something about it. Some people, if they are comfortable with the person, they might hold a hand, for example, or give a tap on the shoulder, whatever makes you, whatever is appropriate for that particular situation.
Interesting.
Yes.
So actually that means emotions can unite people.
Exactly. So the whole issue about empathy is putting yourself in the other person's shoe and feeling, or almost trying to feel how that person feels without actually judging them and without comparing notes. Because, for example, if somebody comes and say, "Oh, I failed my driving test," and I say, "What are you talking about? I failed my driving test twice." So we start comparing notes. This is not empathy. So the idea is that you let that person express his feeling, you understand his despair, his unhappiness because he failed his driving test is something important for him. He feels under pressure. He worries that he might not pass again. So instead of just letting the person, some people get to the point of problem solving. So they would suggest things. So I would probably do this. I would probably do that.
This is very important because a lot of times we tend to do this when someone is actually looking out for some sympathy or yours. Yes. We tend to bring in logic, and this is where men and women clash.
Exactly. Perfectly, you spot it on. This is where women are better in acknowledging feelings and giving that comfort. So they will say, "Tell me more." So, that must be hard. So if you are going through a difficult day, you speak to your female friend, she will be able to listen without judging. Whereas men are automatically moving into problem solving gear. So they will say, "This is what you should do, 1, 2, 3. The other thing is that to empathize, you don't actually have to go through that process, but you have to be very careful not to fake it. For example, a funny story happened to one of my medical students. He was working in the labor ward. So part of the, when medical students are training, they go into the labor ward. And this woman came in and she was in labor pain and she was very anxious. And he said, "Don't worry, it will not hurt." So the lady became very angry. She said, "What do you know? How many times did you give birth?" So he was, poor thing, he was trying to be empathetic.
Yeah. She was busy judging though.
Exactly, but in a sense, she's right. He never gave birth. He would never, but he was just trying to be kind and express. And that's something will take us to the point of that empathy is the core skill for people working in healthcare in general. It's important that you acknowledge people's feeling. We work through people who have different difficulties, being physical, being psychological. Some people have terminal illnesses, so they know that, for example, people with cancer, they might not have a cure, they might be dying soon. Nobody knows when anybody's dying. But how do you try to comfort them without being too touchy feeling about it? So how do you do it properly? That's a skill that you need to,
because they don't want sympathy.
Exactly. So sympathy is different from empathy. So sympathy is like you're watching that somebody, you are in pain, I know that, but empathy, you are being kind of emotionally involved, but to the right point. You need to be careful not to get too involved, because some people, they get what we call compassion fatigue. So especially, for example, during COVID, that was stressful time, during the first, second, and third wave, health workers, they start working with dead people on a daily basis. So sometimes they get too emotionally involved with the family. And I remember talking to some health workers, they were saying they felt pride in when the person is leaving for example, the field hospital. They wanted to escort that person to see the happiness in the family's eyes that this person survived. And when people die, especially June, for example, was a terrible time. More than 700 people died. It was a difficult time because people felt, how am I going to break the news to the family? You see people crying every day. Some of them are losing their younger children. Some of them are losing more than a family member. So how do you handle those emotions without being too involved? So the idea is that to express empathy, but to the right point.
Now, could empathy be an important element in the corporate world?
Definitely, empathy is important in healthcare, for example, but also in the corporate world, because empathy helps you develop good social relationships, good social skills with people. So when you work in a company now, people are more aware of the importance of mental health well-being at work, whatever field of work you're doing. So a good leader a good manager is somebody who is empathizing with his colleagues, with his staff, with team members. He acknowledges that they are going through difficulty, they are experiencing different times, the generation issue has a role to play. It's interesting you mentioned the differences between gender, but also in some study they suggest that, for example, doctors, when they age, they have less empathy because they they can come numb with the amount of difficulty they see.
Okay.
So it's
very practical for them day to day.
It's practical, but for some of them it's a good thing, because if you're working in a trauma center, you see people coming with the blood. You don't want to just sit there and you need to act.
True,
so for some people, just having the right amount of empathy, because you don't want to start, weeping and crying with them. Yes. You need to act on it. So it's about having that balance.
Oh, that's very interesting. So very much far away from sympathy. Yes. You want to understand, but also you want to be the one who's practical enough to solve a problem.
Exactly. The other thing is that also the busy lifestyle means people becoming less empathetic. Social media makes it easier to be rude and horrible to people because they are not in front of you. There is this, screen difference between you, so you don't see them, you don't see the impact of your horrible attitude toward them. Some people look at social media relationship are very disposable, so you can have friends that you
and block them later.
Exactly. So whatever the minor argument, people don't have that same compassion with each other. So social media has a role in making people less empathetic. Sometimes if you are not mixing with people outside your social bubble, then you don't get to see how does it feel like to, for example, to be poor, or to work longer hours, or to be unemployed. So, for example, in your job as a journalist, you go outside, you see people from different parts of the country, from different social backgrounds. This allows you to empathize because you see other people who might be less well off than yourself. So that's a good thing to develop your own empathy. Meeting other people, socializing with people, reading is a good thing, because then when you read about other people's experiences, you tend to understand them more.
Interesting. Finally, I'm so surprised you almost read my mind, because with the topic of empathy, I really wanted to touch on social media.
Yes.
How people want to comment on anything and everything. It seems like the opinion is most important, and it doesn't even matter if that topic is concerned to them. So what would you like to advise? Because all of us are living in that digital world today. So what would you like to tell us to maintain our empathy? And the other thing I noticed is maybe empathy needs human contact, in the sense of facial expressions, emotions, our body language changes, when you're hurt.
Yeah, so that's important in reading other people's emotion, to be able to react with them. So obviously it's easy to empathize if the person is in front of you. This is where, when we had to move to online sessions, people find it very difficult because they don't actually have the same presence in the room. For example, some doctors start to panic. What do I do if the patient cries? We're used to passing the tissue, for example, or pausing or saying something to let that moment go. Because for some people, being present with them in the same room is very important. They feel more understood. And this is something that probably will take longer for people to translate into digital or virtual life. The thing with social media is that sometimes it becomes a trend. Bullying becomes a good thing. And sometimes if I am upset because something happened at my workplace, I tend to take it out in strangers.
Really?
So, and sometimes I think it's useful to say, do I need to comment on this? Can I just let it pass? Why is it bothering me? For example, you could be seeing something silly, something that you think it's too judgmental, or something that is too cheap. So why bother yourself? It's not, if you don't like it, you don't have to. You don't have to like every post. You don't have to watch. Why are you wasting your life on social media?
That is the best question.
Yes.
Why are you wasting your time? And especially creating negative energy, because we have a choice.
Definitely, you do have a choice, and I think part of it that I try to do this myself, detoxing gradually. For example, I learned to not grab my phone when I wake up, so I will only do that after getting ready to go to work, because there's nothing urgent. If there's an urgent thing, I'll get a call. Nothing urgent needs to be addressed before going to bed. So at least half an hour, I will disconnect from the internet, put my telephone in a silent mode, and it's my time to chill down and relax. Otherwise, once you start flickering around and looking at this, and it becomes endless, and with time it becomes your source of time, mostly time killing rather than doing something useful.
Yeah, and using it as a resource. I want to say thank you so much, Dr. Hamed al Sinawi. And today our topic has been empathy, and great tips you've given us, whether we want to be on social media platforms, or whether corporate or for healthcare workers. And most importantly, even for patients,
Yes.
because I've heard some of the healthcare workers being hurt because the patients were insensitive towards them.
Exactly.
So we can reverse the roles as well. I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lakshmi. It's been a pleasure.